Thank you so much for joining us today. As we go ahead and get started, we'll let a couple people trickle in and everything as people get settled in. We just want to cover a few housekeeping rules, but I'm super excited that everyone is here. Let us know where you're joining from in the chat. Also, we are a week away from Thanksgiving, which is absolutely insane. I don't know where the time has gone. But let's go ahead and surface, what meal you're looking forward to eating, or like what your favorite food is around like the Thanksgiving holiday. I always like to get inspiration and ideas. So go ahead and put that in the chat as well. But we're super excited that you're here, and I'm really happy to kick off this conversation. So for those of you who don't know me, my name is Allie Hammond. I'm our marketing manager here at Virtuous, and I am super excited to be here. I am just going to be kicking off a few housekeeping rules before we get started. So first and foremost, please feel free to utilize the chat. If you guys have any questions at all as we get throughout the content today and today's presentation, feel free to drop your questions in there. Also, if there's anything that you guys find that is working well for you, or anything you would like to ask your fellow peers about, feel free to drop that in the chat as well. We will leave room at the end for Q&A, so we'll leave about 10 minutes. But feel free to drop those questions, and we'll make sure that we get to them when we get to a good stopping place. Secondly, the session will be recorded. So if you have to drop for any reason, I know it's a really busy time of year. We're kind of pulled in a million different directions. If you need to go for any reason, then you will be able to have access to this presentation and the recording as well. That will be sent out tomorrow, and you're able to utilize that. And thirdly, we are just super excited that you're here. Thank you so much for joining us during this really hectic time, and just taking time away from your busy schedule to come hang out with us. So I'm really honored to be here with our good friend Toby Wise from Rooted Software on this conversation of selecting the right suite of nonprofit tools to grow giving. So just a little quick, Rooted Software partners with nonprofits to provide IT support, core systems, and CRM consulting and app development. So their goal is not to only identify and discuss problems, but to find practical solutions that fit your needs and solve that problem. So through nonprofit experience, they're well equipped to handle multifaceted challenges and find creative solutions for each issue that arises. Without further ado, I will go ahead and pass it over to you, Toby, and you can take it away.
Thank you, Ali. Yeah, really great to be here. And first thing I will say, you may have already realized I have an accent, so you kind of have to tune in. Google Translate is available, but yeah, I am British, but I've lived in California now for 17 years, so it's not quite the same unless I call my mother back in the UK, and then it goes back to how it was. So that's first thing. So yes, I'm Toby, and I'm here in the Bay Area in California, and I believe actually President Biden of the US and President Xi of China are like 30 miles away from me right now in San Francisco, but I'm 30 miles northeast of San Francisco. It's where I live now. I'm married, 4 kids. I'm the CEO of Rooted Software, and Ali mentioned a little bit earlier about what we do. I work myself for a nonprofit for about 14 years, and now while I also run Rooted, I'm simultaneously I run a small nonprofit that works with homeless people in the Bay Area. So what are we going to be talking about today? We're going to be talking about the ideal suite of nonprofit fundraising tools that you would have. I'm actually going to start off with kind of a discussion about what are the tools we're talking about. Why might you not have the ideal suite? How could you have got into an imperfect suite of systems that may or may not work well together? And then how do we improve that? How do we get to a good, solid set of software that works well together? Just a comment, if you have any questions, please, as Ali said, please put those in the chat, and I'll be leaving at least 10 minutes at the end of our time for questions. So without further ado, so systems. I see systems as tools. So I've got a picture of a bunch of tools here. Nonprofit systems are potentially a bunch of tools to solve specific problems in your nonprofit. Like I'll throw out throw out some examples. So what kind of tools? So you've got your CRM. Your CRM is your single source of truth. Ideally, it's where you keep your donors. It's where you keep your giving information. And in an ideal situation, a CRM is the place that you keep your every single contact that you interact with, not just donors, but volunteers, grant people. Maybe if you're an organization that works, for example, with churches, maybe you keep the church and the pastor, or maybe you work with businesses. Maybe you're an educational organization and you want to keep your alumni or staff in that system. And so potentially a CRM is not just a donor database, but a single source of truth for all of your contacts and relationships with those contacts. I've got a counting system up here. So these, again, bread and butter. A nonprofit is a business, and money comes in, money goes out, and you need to track that in an accounting system. And there's a different purpose for an accounting system compared to a CRM. And so you're going to have an accounting system such as Sage or QuickBooks or Financial Edge, something like that, maybe a Microsoft product. Then you're going to have a online fundraising tool. Like, you need to be able to take donations online somehow, hopefully by credit card and bank account, hopefully one time and recurring. Hopefully people can designate to specific funds in your organization. And then obviously those donations need to be able to flow seamlessly into the CRM. In an ideal world, you need some ability to send emails in bulk. You might use a tool like Virtuous to do that, or you might use a third-party tool like MailChimp or Constant Contact. That the goal of that tool is to either send one-off or bulk emails to specific target audiences of donors or potential donors in your system, and also to have automated series. For example, you might have a welcome series for a new member, or you might have a last year, but unfortunately not this year, automatic series or reactivation series. And so automations can be helpful with that, of particular events and newsletters. Then we are going to have volunteer tracking. So we need a way to track not just who are your volunteers, but what kind of skills do they have? What's their availability? What is their schedule? Where have they served in the past? Where are they serving today? You need to be able to track that kind of information for volunteers. Also events. Events meaning a place, at a certain time, certain place where you need people to register. You may have payments. It may be a free event, but you need to be able to track the event details, the registrations, the payments, and hopefully there's a return on investment of that event, and you want to be able to track that as well. We have grant tracking. So that entire process of gathering grant information, working on a grant application, a grant proposal, tracking maybe foundations you're working on to get grants from, that needs to be tracked in the system. Again, you may have multiple systems for all of these things. You may not have a system. You may have pen and paper. You may have Excel, but most nonprofits have to deal with these things. We have, we have BI reports. BI stands for business intelligence. So the ability to gather data from multiple places and report on it in one central reporting product. Metabase is an example of a BI tool. Another one is Power BI. Another one is Tableau. So those are different BI tools. Sometimes you use a tool within your database and sometimes a third-party tool. Another type of system then is web forms. So the ability to gather new subscribers through your website and that kind of thing. And then we have e-commerce, the ability to sell products on your website and ideally integrate that information back into your CRM. Check scanning. Now this is a system or a tool that usually only applies to larger nonprofits taking maybe 100 or more checks, processing 100 or more checks a day. And in order to eliminate that manual data entry, you want to use a check scanning software, not just to scan checks, but also response devices. And it creates a data file of the gift information, the date information, the constituent information that you can ideally send to the bank and import into your CRM. We have potentially, if you're a missionary sending organization, some missionary sending organizations use a missionary partner development tool to have missionaries see the donation specifically to them. That applies to some other organizations as well. So that's all the kind of systems that we have at nonprofits. And they, like I said, they may be consolidated into a single system, that would be wonderful. They may be a bunch of separate systems, and if they're separate systems, they could be integrated or they could not. And I'm going to talk a bit later about what's the difference in the pros and the cons between consolidating systems into one or having separate tools that integrate together. But first, why are they a pain? Like, why is this a mess? Why is this a headache? One of the reasons is potentially you have systems that didn't live up to the hype. Like, you were promised something in a sales process. You were promised that your volunteer problems would be gone, and that you wouldn't have to manage their availability, their attendance, their skills, but maybe the system didn't deliver on its promises. Another issue is change management. So it's not good enough to have a system if your people are not using it, and your people need to know how, if they were using something previously, how to transition into the new system, and they need to be well trained, and you need to have documented business processes. If that wasn't effectively managed, some organizations I've worked with, they just go and grab a tool and they turn it on. They're like, here you go, but that isn't usually good enough unless people have the time to step back and build a process in the system and figure out how to use it well in conjunction with other systems. Thirdly, you may have systems that don't talk well to each other. So if you have, for example, an online fundraising tool. So I'll give a specific example without naming names. I worked with and spoke with a couple of organizations where they had an online fundraising tool to take donations online. They had a CRM or donor database to kind of track people, and they had an accounting system to track the money coming in, and they had an email marketing system. But the problem was there was no integration at all between those systems. So literally every time someone gives a donation on their website, say by credit card, somebody comes in the morning, prints it out on a piece of paper, manually enters it into their CRM, and then that passes on to the accounting department, who manually enters that transaction either in individual level or summary level into their accounting system. Somebody else manually types the email address into the email marketing system. That's a lot of time for one donation, potentially as long as 30 minutes of data entry time for a single donation. And if, imagine somebody on the online fundraising tool, they don't just give a gift, but they change their address, they moved house, they have a new email address. Well, somebody has to update that. The ideal situation is that would be automated, no manual data entry, but that's not always the case if your systems do not work well together. Another issue is poor data hygiene. So that's the situation where you have systems that don't work well together. Somebody changes their email address on your online fundraising tool, but you don't update it anywhere else. What happens is you have data that's out of sync. You don't know what's true and what's false, which is the new address, which is the bad address. You get duplicates. You don't want to have duplicates. You want to have one constituent exists one time and is in sync between systems. And if you don't have that, it really becomes unmanageable. And finally, just not having a single source of truth in the first place, well, you're not going to be able to effectively communicate with, market to, and work with your supporters. You're not going to be able to nurture future donors if you don't even know who your people are. Like, you don't want to communicate with somebody who looks like a potential donor and then find out, oh, wow, this person's actually been a volunteer for 3 years. But I didn't know that because my volunteer system wasn't talking to my my donation management system. That's awkward. You don't want to be in that, or you don't want to figure out that you're talking to a potential donor who's an event attender and you didn't know that. So you want to, in order to have effective fundraising tools, you need to be able to nurture those relationships, whether they're an existing donor, whether they're a volunteer or an event attender, or maybe someone who works at a foundation, you've been working on a grant, or somebody who's purchased something on a store on your website. You want to be able to relate to people where they're at, and how they communicate with you and what their relationship with you has been, in order to nurture those relationships. And hopefully they get more engaged with you as a donor and in other ways down the road. But you can't do that without a single source of truth. So that's why these systems can be a pain. Just a couple of reasons, I suppose. So next question is, how do we get there? So we know it's a pain. We know what the systems are. They're not meeting those needs. They don't do what I just said. So why? Why did we get in that mess? Well, a couple of reasons quickly. Your vendors might have been confusing. You might have had some false promises. Our system works great with everything, but it doesn't. Or this is easy to use and we have excellent documentation, but do you? or maybe you do and you haven't figured out how to use it yet. So the vendors could be confusing. You may not have enough staff to use the systems effectively. You may have got systems that are actually over and above what your staff are comfortable with, and that might be an issue of not having the right people in the right places, or it might just be a training issue. But people need to be well equipped to use the tools that you have. Obviously, financial roadblocks, you might have found the best tool in the world, but you can't afford it. But sometimes you unintentionally try to save money on software and end up spending it on hours and hours and hours of manual data entry. And if you actually do the math, it would have been cheaper to get good software than pay people to spend those hundreds of hours manually entering information. And so sometimes those financial roadblocks are a little tricky. You may not have seen that spending more money could be helpful. But sometimes there's legitimate financial roadblocks, of course, as well. You can't always afford everything, and then it's just a matter of having a right priority in what systems to invest in first. Staff change fatigue, meaning it's just hard. It's just hard to keep on throwing up new systems. Some people are more excited about change than other people. I've certainly met many people who just say, but we've always done it this way. This is our process. We can't do it another way. Like, for example, I suggested to somebody, maybe if somebody gives to you online, maybe they expect to get their receipt by email, not in the mail. And they're like, well, but we send all our receipts in the mail. Well, maybe you could do both, or maybe text messages are an option if they give by cell phone. That's the kind of question to ask there. And then lack of a clear big picture solution, meaning, well, if you haven't watched this presentation yet, you might not know how to get there. So hopefully I'll help you see that. But stepping back from one particular problem that you have, like, I just need to track my volunteers, I have to solve that one problem, and you become totally focused on that and ignore everything else. And when I say big picture, what I mean is you kind of need to see everything. You kind of need to see, how does your volunteer system and your CRM and your grant checking system work? How does it all work together? Next topic. So I wanted to talk about what is the ideal situation. And there's not one answer to the question. This particular diagram I put up on the screen is representing a hypothetical situation where all of your systems are separate. They're separate systems. Then you don't have one system to rule them all, like Lord of the Rings ring, but you have separate systems. On the top of this diagram, we have web systems. So you've got I mentioned earlier, the web forms to collect information, the online fundraising tool, the e-commerce tool. The red lines on this diagram represent integrations. So if you were to have totally separate systems for all of these things, and you want the data to flow seamlessly, well, you need to have them integrated. You need a way to, for example, let's say you have WordPress on your website and you have a form on your WordPress website. Well, if you have some WordPress form like Gravity Forms or something, you need to be able to get that data into your CRM. Let's say the CRM is Virtuous. Or, better situation in that scenario, use Virtuous Forms, and it's automatically integrated. This red line is almost seamless at that point. If it's not a Virtuous form, well, then you have to intentionally create this integration. The same kind of concept is true for these other systems as well. We have check scanning over here, I mentioned earlier. So these are ways that gifts and people can come into your CRM. On the left-hand side of this diagram, we have auxiliary business systems, so volunteer event grant management. So there are additional functionality that you need, may exist within your CRM or may exist outside your CRM, but you need that information to flow into your CRM. Usually that is a one-way push, could be a two-way push ideally as well. At the bottom of the diagram, we have our accounting tool. The gift information, either in detail or summary, needs to go in there from the CRM ideally. I've seen situations where that red line is coming from somewhere else, and then you miss things. And then on the right of the diagram, we have the marketing automation, reporting, missionary partner development. These are kind of like outputs of the CRM potentially. So the emails come into the CRM from online, and then they come out into the marketing automation platform like MailChimp, for example. Again, if you have Virtuous, if you're considering Virtuous, I'll show you in a minute what Virtuous includes and doesn't include. But this is a good picture of the kind of systems that you need and how they work together. And you see that the CRM is the central focus point. It's like the hub of a bicycle wheel. with data flowing in and out. And so if you were to have this perfect situation with these integrations, you would have your CRM being your single source of truth, working well with these other platforms. So that's like the ideal systems. I've mentioned a couple of times now consolidation and integration, and I kind of want to explain the difference between them, the pros and the cons between them. And I'm going to use, since Virtuous is hosting this webinar, I'm going to talk more specifically about Virtuous and how Virtuous consolidates or integrates some of those systems. So when we talk about consolidation, first of all, we're talking about a multi-tool analogy. So you could have a Swiss Army knife, or I think that's a Gerber multi-tool on the left over there, or something like that. So it's one system to accomplish many things. So for example, Virtuous, well, that's a couple of things it does. It does CRM, it does online fundraising, it does email marketing. So it's doing many tools with one system as opposed to separate tools. It's a single vendor providing those systems. So if it breaks, if you have a question, if you need training, you've got one place to go to. So that's a pro. Salesforce is another example of one platform that's trying to do everything. But Virtuous is really tailored to a system that works well for all the things that nonprofits need. So Virtuous specifically, I wanted to explain, what does Virtuous consolidate? Like if you go with Virtuous, I showed you the tools that you need. Which tools do you get with Virtuous potentially, depending on your what platform or what level of service you sign up for with Virtuous? You get the CRM in the middle. You get web forms, like I mentioned. You get an online giving tool, such as Raise Donors potentially, if you include that in your package. Wealth analytics built in, volunteer management built in, or you go with something like Vomo for that. Grant management, part of the CRM product, and event management as well, including tracking registrations. BI reporting, either using the inbuilt reporting tools, or perhaps you go and get Metabase and that Virtuous provides as an add-on, or so that there's a way to integrate those Metabase reports right into the CRM, so you don't have to go get them outside. The marketing automation I mentioned. So these are the systems that Virtuous could consolidate for you, and that's great, because then you got the one-stop shop essentially that I was talking about, and you don't have to worry about integrations. That's the big advantage here. So integrations, now let's say we don't have everything consolidated. What does integration mean? Well, it's separate systems that communicate and share data. System A is talking to system B. Quite possibly they're not made by the same vendor. Let's say you use Virtuous for your CRM, but you just love MailChimp and you cannot get away from MailChimp, or your marketing people love MailChimp. Well, then you're going to have a connection and integration between Virtuous and MailChimp. You could have used Virtuous marketing and eliminated system B, but if you're using MailChimp, you're going to have that integration. Another example, if you don't use Raise Donors, you use iDonate for your online marketing, you would need an integration. I've used another example with Razor's Edge, for example. Razor's Edge could talk to MailChimp. Or you might use for your accounting tool, you might use QuickBooks or Sage, both of which work with Virtuous. I put a link down here, by the way, if you're interested in the integrations that Virtuous offers with third-party tools. They list them on this web page, and it shows you. You'll see there's online fundraising tools and email marketing tools and reporting tools, wealth analytics tools. So it's worth understanding. And this is an important consideration when you're choosing a system or a suite of systems. What do I want to consolidate? What do I want to integrate? There's a couple of different types of integration, and this is getting a little bit more into the technical details here. When a company such as Virtuous tells you on their website, here's some stuff we integrate with right now out of the box, what they usually mean, like I'll use the example of QuickBooks, or Sage Intacct. Virtuous has built a direct integration with QuickBooks and another one with Sage Intacct. And that means if you get Virtuous, maybe it's free, maybe it's not free, but you can get this direct integration with a third-party tool. And that means they've built the connection, it works, and you just get the two tools and set up the integration, and it will work. A different scenario would be to use what's called an integration tool. So this is something that sits in between systems A and B to make them communicate if they don't communicate directly. And there's third-party integration tools such as Zapier that allow systems to communicate, usually a little bit more limited in terms of the data they can get across. needs a little bit more technical setup to get going and might not be free. So those are the negatives. But if they don't connect directly, you can go with a third-party tool. And then third scenario, they don't connect directly and they don't work with your third-party tool, but you need to build an integration. You can build a custom integration using either API, which is just a way to go and grab data out of a system, or webhook, which is the way that the system pushes information to another one. You can build a custom integration using that technology. Again, that's probably going to be the most expensive of the options, and so probably your last resort if one of the other options doesn't work for you, but it is available. And actually Rooted builds a bunch of those, such as, for example, we built an integration between Virtuous and Blackboard Financial Edge when one didn't exist, and so we built that, and that's available. So what does Virtuous integrate with? I mentioned what it consolidates. What does it integrate? On the left of this diagram, and this is not an exhaustive list by any means, I'm just trying to give some examples here. On the left of the diagram, you can see check scanning tools. There's one from a company called AQ2, for example. E-commerce tools, potentially. I'm not aware of any direct integrations, but it's possible to build that integration with Zapier or with APIs. And then peer-to-peer giving tools such as Classy or iDonate, something like that, or Fundraise Up. Virtuous has native integrations with those products. On the right of the diagram, you may have a custom app that you use, for example, and you could build an integration then from Virtuous to push a subset of contacts, perhaps, or a subset of giving reporting data into a custom app. I mentioned accounting tools, and then one second, sorry, accounting tools, and then I mentioned missionary partner development. So these are potentially tools that Virtuous could integrate with. So consolidation and integration. Why did I give you that 5-minute spiel just now on consolidation and integration? Is because your choice of system or systems is going to be driven in part, I would hope and encourage you, by a decision, a more fundamental decision on what is your strategy? Is your strategy to consolidate or to integrate? The pros of consolidation then would be complete instant data sharing, consistent support across teams, consistent user experience. The pro of integration, best-in-class software, easier to switch vendors and systems and add functionality not in the core system, potentially. The cons of consolidation, less feature-rich for non-core areas, potentially, depending on your needs. Harder to switch vendors when you're all in one place. You can't just say, I'm going to switch this little piece without considering everything else. And then there may be components. There may be some things that are consolidated that are available that you don't even need. That could be good or bad. And then the cons on the integration side would be partial data sharing, whereas if you're consolidating, everything exists everywhere. If you're integrating, probably not all of the data is pushed between the systems. It's probably more of a partial sharing of information. There can be delays. It might not be an instantaneous sync of data if you're integrating. And then not every integration is free or simple, as I mentioned earlier. So I guess we've talked about consolidation. Sorry, I'm jumping forward. We've talked about the pains of systems and how you get to the mess. We've talked about the ideal suite of core systems, and we've talked about some of those kind of challenges and decisions between consolidation and integration. And so you're like, great, Toby, thank you. How do I get out of my mess and figure out a plan to move forward? So that's really what I wanted to talk about now. So you're going to want to start figuring out your goals for your organization, which are going to be like, is your goal to have a single source of truth? Is that important to you? Like, is it valuable? What I was describing earlier, where you have that 365-degree view of your constituents, is that helpful? Or is it not helpful? Most of the time it is. And how important is that to you versus having separate systems? I like the motto here, consolidate, and if you can't, integrate. Because I shared the pros and cons just now. There's a lot of value in having one big, powerful tool that just works, one vendor that just helps you well. And so if you can get a bunch of those features together working in one system. You're not going to have to worry about delayed integrations. You're not going to have to worry about, oh, Zapier is not working. You're not going to have to worry about multiple, ways of paying and training everybody. It just works. It's really nice to have software that just works. But sometimes consolidations are not available, or you might need a feature that's not available in the consolidated suite. That's when you go and integrate. You go and integrate when you need to work with an e-commerce tool and it isn't in the main product, but so you need to build an integration, for example. So that's a good kind of a game plan. Again, that decision will be driven by your business need, but also your budget as well. What's the cost differential of multiple versus one system? Another system selection objective, if you're choosing systems, like let's say I don't know if you're virtuous customer, let's say you're a Blackboard customer and you're like, well, I just need to be able to customize my product without paying these really expensive developers. So I need to be able to build an integration. Is your tool that you're selecting, is it affordable? Is it maintainable? Is it inexpensive to make changes to? Or is it actually you have to keep a full-time six-figure salary developer there to do anything? That kind of decision is going to affect what systems you choose. You want a tool that's well supported, good training available, good documentation available. Now, training would be not only during the implementation process, where you have the company, the vendor, or a partner coming alongside you. You maybe have video pre-recorded training material, you have written documentation, and hopefully you have some live training as well. But you're also going to want the ongoing training available. You're going to hire new people. They need to be trained. And I would say that you need training not just on the system itself, but on your usage of the system. Like that you're going to build out your receiving process. Like how did you build it? You need to be able to train new staff on that. And the system you choose may be more or less easy. And not just the system, but the implementation partners you choose may make that training process easier or not. You want good documentation. You want simple use, how do I add a new project? It's nice to be able to find that answer quickly. And then finally, support. And I don't just mean that there is support. How quickly does the support respond to your needs? How knowledgeable are the support people? Are there tier support? Are they available in your time zone? How do you communicate with them? Is it phone? Is it email? Is it chat? I think those are important considerations. And then finally, you want a system that is going to still be here in 10 years' time. Normally, when you're choosing systems, they're not going to be around in 50 years' time. I mean, maybe they will. It'll be great if they are, but you kind of want to have a time frame in your mind of about a decade. So is this system built in such a way that it's using future-proof technology, like cloud technology, for example? It's not dependent upon a server in your building that's going to stop working. It needs to be backed up, but it's using latest technology. So what do I mean? I definitely mean the cloud. Access it via a web browser, accessing it from anywhere, potentially accessing data on mobile. Seamless, automatically working technology, works with different screen sizes, laptops, phones, computers, TVs, whatever. Future-proof, good technology, well-designed. And you can also tell a company using future-proof technology if they're a true software as a service company, like Virtuous, for example. They regularly release updates to their software, and they're usually automatically pushed out to people. And so you're going to get the benefits of it's not just staying the same. Like they're investing in this product, and you quickly get the benefit. You don't have to do like a long manual update process. So those are some of your selection objectives. And obviously, I would pay particular attention, not just to the price, not just to the features, but to the consolidation integration question I mentioned earlier, as well as these other items. So again, how do you get there? Now, this is where I'm trying to get personal here. How do you, in your nonprofit, even start this process? Well, I would simply start by getting a piece of paper and writing down a list of the ideal systems I mentioned earlier. And by the way, you get the recording. I'm happy to share the PowerPoint of this presentation with you. But list of the systems I mentioned: online fundraising, CRM, volunteer, grant management, event management, accounting, email marketing, BI reporting. List those systems out in your organization, or just list them out. And then I would ask the question, well, do you have them today? Like, if you have them today, what do you have, first of all? And if you don't have it today, well, would it serve a need in your organization? Do you need a grant management tool that's better than Excel, that actually is an intentional tool? Do you need a volunteer tracking or event tracking tool if you don't have that today? If you do have it today, is it serving your needs well? Is it tracking the information you need? Not just that, but is it pushing the data where it needs to go, like into the CRM? Are your users and staff feeling well supported, well trained, well equipped? And is that system future proof? You want to be asking those questions I mentioned on the previous slide about each of your systems. And then, well, is it the integration question? Is there an integration between, for example, between your online fundraising tool and your CRM or not? If there's not, there needs to be. You need to have systems that are either consolidated or integrated. Double data entry is a waste of your time. You're running nonprofits. You need to get focused on the ministry, not the systems. The systems are there to serve you. It's a screwdriver. The screwdriver is a tool to serve you. You're not serving the screwdriver. So you want to have systems that work well together. And that means integrations and or consolidations. And so I would evaluate that for each of the systems you have today or you wish you had today. And I would ask the question, is the integration working well? Or is it consolidated? And if it's not, could it be? That will help you decide that. And then finally, so you've got your systems listed out, the ones you have today, the ones you wish you had. You've kind of evaluated how well they're serving you, or if they're integrated, if they're meeting your needs, or if you don't have the systems, how much you would like to have them. You're going to need to prioritize that. So you've got, 14 systems on your list. What's the most important to you? A word of caution in that. The diagram I shared earlier, this one, as you can see, middle of the diagram, CRM. If you don't have a solid CRM in the middle, you're not going to be able to build those integrations with everything else, because the CRM is the hub in the middle of your bicycle wheel. It's the system by which all the other systems come in and out. And so you have to start with a CRM that either consolidates things together like this, or enables systems to communicate separately like this. You need to make that decision first. And so if you have a great CRM like Virtuous, awesome. If you don't, I would encourage you to look at that first and then make that decision intentionally with your eyes wide open, knowing that after that, okay, we have to have we can't have CRM and not have online fundraising. We have to have accounting. Maybe you want to switch your accounting system later, or does it integrate? Does it not integrate? Could it integrate later? So asking those kind of questions for each of your systems, starting with CRM, but you want to get to the place of having a priority to improve your systems. So I spoke quite quickly there, but that's my general path forward. I would encourage you specifically to look at Virtuous in the ways that I have described and ask yourself the question about, could Virtuous work well for my CRM? Could it consolidate these other things? And maybe you're not using Virtuous. Maybe you're, for example, maybe you're using Blackboard today and you have to have a separate online fundraising tool because Blackboard one isn't even mobile friendly enough for you, or you need to have a separate BI tool. So, you don't have those integrations. Well, how could that be better? There's also the other systems out there where they promise you the consolidation, like maybe you have it often depends on how it's implemented, but you have a third-party tool where they promise we are the one-stop shop, but it's not meeting your needs well. So you do need to make sure that that's not the case. It's nice when you're working with a company like Virtuous that only works with nonprofits and understands your needs, as opposed to a company, without naming names, that isn't really about nonprofits. They just also happen to work with nonprofits as an additional thing, but it's not their main area of their business. It might not be meeting your needs as effectively as a nonprofit focused company. So I'd ask that question as well. So next steps, how do you get from where you are today? I would suggest going maybe more slowly. Usually when I watch Audible, I usually read it at 1.4 speed, but I've been speaking so quickly, you might need to listen to this again at 1.8 speed, or 0.8 speed rather, to understand, to just evaluate what I said again, or it might be helpful to get this PowerPoint presentation. I would understand where you are today and your pain points using that process I just defined. I would map out your ideal suite of systems. I would understand the opportunities to improve consolidation or integration. So I would, let's say you have the CRM figured out. Maybe your next goal is volunteer management. Like, I'm using Excel. I want it to be integrated. I'm going to use the tool that's in Virtuous, so I'm going to, get this other tool integrated in. So just making those decisions specifically and planning for costs and timing to change. A few comments on timing. It's not a wonderful time to put a new CRM live right now in November, right before your busiest giving season of the year. So you want to go live with especially a CRM, but also an online giving tool, probably in a before your busy season. So the earliest I'd recommend that probably would be a February, and the latest I'd recommend that in the year would probably be in October. So in that time frame, so if you're looking at 2024, you want to go live in that time frame. A lot of people like to go live in the summer because then you have a couple of months to figure out the system before your busy time at the end of the year. Now, a lot of migrations can take, depending on the number of records and the number of systems you're moving from, could take as long as 6 months, maybe even 9 months. So you kind of need to work backwards. If you want to go live in September 2024, you might need to start that project in January or by latest April 2024 in order to be done by September. So you might need to be looking at your systems now, signing a contract in February so you can start in April, for example. So working backwards with your timeline. You may have other systems like grant management that you can be more flexible than a CRM or a fundraising tool. Your accounting tool, well, that's probably going to be dependent upon your fiscal year. Usually people go live with a new accounting tool at the start of a fiscal year. So I would consider that. So just quickly, we mentioned at the beginning, I'm the CEO of Rooted Software. How could we help you? Just a few brief things here. You can also check out our website, but we can help you with the selecting of the software in the first place. Does Virtuous work well for you? Maybe you're looking at something else that's outside of the scope of Virtuous, like an e-commerce system that could work with Virtuous. How do you make those decisions? If you want to implement Virtuous, we do, we've just, I think, exceeded 100 Virtuous implementations we do. And so it's not just moving data from A to B, but it's helping you use it and build it. We kind of use the house analogy. It's not just moving boxes from house A to house B, but unpacking them in a way that works well for you and your organization, and dealing with duplicates and data hygiene and training and business process improvement along the way. We build custom integrations. If there isn't one out of the box, if there is one out of the box, use that one. If there's not, we can build them for you. We also build custom apps. We do ongoing consulting. If you need help once you're live, let's say you go live with Virtuous, you don't just want us to be around for the implementation, but to stick around for another 6 months to help you really get the best value out of the system and augment the wonderful support that Virtuous provides. We do that. We have post-launch success packages right after you go live, potentially for 6 months or 12 months to help you utilize the system. And then finally, we actually also do managed IT. If you just need someone to keep the computers running and your Wi-Fi on, we can help with that as well. A little bit of contact information for me if you want to get in touch. There's my email address. You're very welcome to email me with any questions, and I will take questions at the end of this call as well. But if you have other questions, that's my email address and website. You scan the QR code, that will get you a form to fill out to ask me a question, but you're very welcome to ask it now as well. So that's what I had to share today. I'm going to stop my screen share real fast here. And please go ahead and ask any questions you have. So I'm just looking at the questions here. And there's a question, everything integrated. Ali, did you have any questions there?
Yeah, so we have one from Jennifer here, where it looks like she said, which is actually a really good question. It says, everything integrated would be the best. It seems that at several nonprofits I've worked for to push back against integrations because of security breaches. How do you evaluate the risk of breach to the efficiency of doing the work?
Okay, let me just read that again here. Okay, so yeah, security breaches. So when you have multiple systems and when you have an integration between those systems and you're concerned about security, you've got at least 3 places to think about for security. You've got system A, you've got system B, and you've got whatever is allowing the systems to communicate, like if it's Zapier. So you've got 3 places. Let's say it's the online fundraising tool pushing to Virtuous through Zapier. And so the more systems you have talking to each other, the more careful you have to be for breaches. You need to make sure that each of those systems is compliant. If it's credit card data, is it PCI compliant? If it's child data, is it HIPAA compliant? And you need to have a sense of confidence in the security of the company. And so that is a consideration. If it's consolidation, well, then at least you've decreased the risk by there being less places, for data to be stolen. And then you want to be intentional and thoughtful. There's things that you trust the company with security, for their servers, for their infrastructure, and there's things that you need to actually intentionally plan internally in your organization. Like, do we have password complexity? Do we terminate accounts when people leave the company? Do we have limited security permissions based on people's roles? And so that's something you really want to think intentionally about. So.
That's great. Yeah, thank you so much. That's a great question. Data privacy is definitely at the top of the top priority to consider when making, a technology switch, or where to consider when to put your data. Another question, as far as when, you say you have a ton of systems and things like that, or you're just looking to start out and thinking, where do I start? Is there just like a few core systems outside of, CRM and like accounting systems that you would say, hey, I would definitely consider these when looking at growing giving in the future in 2024, saying even like marketing tools, or what would you consider to be critical going forward in next year?
Yeah, and focusing specifically on giving to answer that question. So the bread and butter that you have to grow giving, you have to have the CRM. You absolutely have to have a good online fundraising tool. That tool has to work on mobile as well as desktop, because more than 50% of US donors, and worldwide, but just looking at US data, I think it's more like 60% of those online fundraising transactions are going to come on mobile. And you want to make that as not sticky, meaning as fast and simple as possible. So Apple Pay is great, Google Pay is great, anything to get that transaction through quickly, and it works. It's a great experience on iOS and Android. So the online fundraising tool and all the things that come with it, you're going to have your specific requirements for that tool, and then getting the data into the CRM. Secondly, yes, marketing automation. You have to, and one thing I love about Virtuous is the responsive part of it, that you can look at how the donor is interacting with you on your website, on social, and you can respond according to how they are interacting with you, so you can be relevant to them. And then having a tool to allow you to effectively communicate quickly in the mechanism that they want, whether it's email, SMS, physical postcard in the mail, social, but whatever method you need to communicate effectively with your donors, you need the tools to be able to do that. So that's like the most important, the ability to receive the gift well and efficiently, and the ability to communicate effectively with the right people in the right times.
That's great. And then just, from your experience to giving, that you work with so many different nonprofits, like I'd love to hear more, just like, you mentioned there's a lot of, fundraisers wearing so many hats and doing a lot of things manually. You said one donation is equal to 30 minutes of time when you're doing everything, when processing one donation. Is there an example that you can think of when someone's considering using automation or consolidating systems, of a time that, how it helps in the back office team and what that looks like?
Yeah, I mean, anything that's eliminating not only the data entry time, but the checking time. Like, is this actually, like, this guy called Toby Weiss gave a donation, but is it the same Toby Weiss as the 3 Toby Weisses I have in my system? And if you can automate making sure that it's the right person that we're updating, it's the right gift information, we know what's the old record, what's the new record. And the more you can automate that, the more your systems just work seamlessly together, the better. And, like, I started a nonprofit, but I also run a business. How did I do that without an admin person? I selected systems that work well together. So when somebody gives a gift on my website for my nonprofit, which is called hope680.org, you go and give a gift. Thank you very much. $100. You enter your name and address and email. It flows into my CRM. It flows to my email marketing tool, and it goes into my accounting system. Meanwhile, I'm busy running Rooted software and I don't do anything. At the end of the year, I do send out a receipt. Occasionally, we write a nice letter to say thank you, but I'm not spending half an hour processing those gifts. They're automated. through my systems, and that enables me to be efficient with my time and my resources.
That's great. Love that. Well, let's see if we have any more questions. Feel free to drop them in the chat. We do have 10 minutes left. Toby, is there anything, just any closing thoughts or anything like that as well? Will we wait, see if anybody has any more final questions that you would want to leave people with?
Yeah, I kind of want to, it's scary sometimes. Like, this is good. You're like, this is a lot of information. How do I even start there? And I gave you a roadmap of like the questions to ask, but I do want to recognize that it is scary to change something that you might be it might not meet all your needs, but you know how to use it. It's very comfortable. So it's like, okay, how do I get over that fear factor for switching? And I think a few just thoughts there. Not being in a rush too much, not creating, like not being like, oh, I have to be live by like next week. I've had people come to me in like September, like I need a new system that's like ready to go in December for online giving. Like that's creating unnecessary stress for yourself. I wouldn't recommend that. So giving yourself enough time to make a good decision, making sure that you have either a vendor or a partner to come alongside you and have a really intentional training process and a really well documented process. And then just like you want to spend the time like knowing your data so that you can make the decisions about where the data is going to go, which systems you're going to choose and in which order. You need to know what is your data, like what information do I have in this system, this system, this system. You also need to know your staff. Where is their time being spent? Like I use that 30-minute metric, but ask for your organization, how long are we spending? You might find out that you're spending not that much money on systems, but a whole lot of money on time. So just knowing the facts and then having an intentional plan. Also, you get the system with all the promises and all the bells and whistles to solve all of your problems, but you're not going to solve them all on the day you go live with the system. So having an intent, but there is a certain amount that you do have to do when you go live. You need to at least be able to replace the bread and butter functionality to keep your nonprofit working effectively that your other systems are providing that you're going to turn off. Like you have to get that working. But the new functionality beyond what you were doing before, you can have a strategic rollout plan over the next 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, depending on what it is, like building out new reports, building out new automations, taking advantage of some of the responsive things that Virtuous does. You can have a good rollout plan for that. And so just like being, depending on your amount of staff, I speak to a lot of nonprofits where they're like, it's just me and I'm the only technical person. Well, being nice to yourself and not doing it all at once would be a recommendation. And then just, if you can work with somebody that has the time to work with you in a personal way and get to know you and be intentional. That's what I would recommend there.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we always say here at Virtuous, crawl, walk, run. Start with where you're at and what you can manage, and take one step at a time. Especially when it's something as switching technologies or switching tools or consolidating. You want to make sure that you're getting a good handle on the car before you drive it. So everybody wants to get that end result, but one foot in front of the other, and you'll definitely get there over time. Well, if we have no other questions, then we will go ahead and give you guys a few minutes back in your day. I know this is a very busy time. This session, I see a couple questions about if you want to get more information on Virtuous, you are able. I dropped a link in the chat there for Virtuous. You're able to schedule a personalized demo and see that. We also have a demo at the December 13th as well. So just like a brief product overview, if you want to take a look at that as well. Also, if you are going through any type of, tech assessment or anything like that, and you're like, where do I start? Rooted is a great resource, and they have a free tech assessment that you're able to do as well. So feel free to scan that QR code, reach out to Toby. They are an amazing, amazing resource, and it helps so many organizations. So they are great. I'll also drop a link in the chat as well for if you want to go onto their website and do that as well. So feel free. And this session will be recorded and sent out tomorrow, along with the access of this presentation. But thank you everyone so much for joining us during this crazy time of year. Toby, thank you so much for hopping on and sharing your expertise and everything that you've learned about helping nonprofits being able to unlock and grow generosity. So thank you so much for hopping on here. And everyone, reach out if you have any questions. We're always happy to help, but wishing you the most successful year end. And please feel free to reach out if there's any resources that we can provide or anything like that. So thank you so much, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Have a good one. Bye.
Bye.